Greetings. I would like to extend my appreciation to the Moya University for this opportunity to share with all of you. With special recognition to our techie wizards, Mike, Rose, and BL, and of course, all of you who have taken your valuable time to participate. This presentation is based to a large degree on the quote that I've brought up. And I'm going to read it. People are apt to forget that with each forward advance of humanity, the demands upon the hierarchy change. New needs must be met, new techniques used, new and experimental methods must be employed. As I write for disciples and initiates, I call this to their attention. This presentation is going to be separated into 4 sections with an opening fire meditation, and then sort of a review of the recent moon eclipse and solar cycles. And given adequate time, I would like to review some of the new influences technologically that are now being made available. Really life-changing, AI and augmented reality. And then we will have a closing meditation, which is taken from the Tibetans' 4th formula for group integration. So before we actually do the meditation, I'd like to share a few quotes that gives participants an opportunity to understand the power and the potency of occult fire. All of the 7 rays are different types of fire. Some are more masculine, some are more feminine. Would someone in the group like to read this quote by DK?
I can read it, Duane. Fire mantra, the wheel of living fire which burns not but ever heals. I would ask you, as far as you possibly can, to insulate yourself from fear and from the effect of the world situation and its allied problems. The future for you is planned, and you can take the right steps through the power of your illumined mind. I would ask you to carry forward this insulation along the line of love, using the ancient method which has been called the wheel of living fire, which burns not but ever heals. This method is occult and safe and constitutes no barrier to relationships, as does the building of a separative wall. The method is as follows. See before you a wheel of fire with 7 spokes. See it immediately before your eyes. Then, by an act of the creative imagination, see yourself standing in the center at the hub of the wheel. There, regard yourself as if you were that hub. From that central position, send out the 7 streams of living love, radiating upon the world. When you do this, you serve and are at the same time completely protected. This exercise can become instantaneous and effective. It generates a protective force and at the same time makes you a living center of light and love.
Thank you, Rose. This is a visual rendering of that description that I did quite some years ago. And we're going to view the actual rotation of fire after one additional quote. And I would simply point out that we are at a time historically where there's a lot of fear and intimidation on a planetary level. And that only by opening to the intuition and the downflow of unconditional love will the lower elementals and the lower mind, which work in conjunction, drive out any of these hindrances. So let us together, Rose, would you like to lead this? But I want everyone to really follow it carefully because the Way of Fire mantra, which is going to take us into the animation, is one of the most profound and advanced mantras that the Tibetan has shared.
Would you like me to read this?
Please.
The way of fire. I seek the way, I yearn to know. Visions I see, and fleeting deep impressions. Behind the portal, on the other side, lies that which I call home. For the circle has been well nigh trod, and the end approaches the beginning. I seek the way, all ways my feet have trod. The way of fire calls me with fierce appeal. Not in me seeks the way of peace, not in me yearns for earth. Let the fire rage, the flames devour, let all the dross be burnt, and let me enter through that gate and tread the way of fire.
Take several even and deep breaths and see from the soul, the master, and the hierarchical levels this downpouring of fiery synthesizing energy that passes through your physical body, eliminating any illness or disease, passing through your emotional body and driving out any rigid or no longer needed emotional elementals, purifying the lower mind and making one continuous connection from your etheric body via all these centers or bodies to these higher reaches.
Bargo devasya limai Yona prachodaya Bhuvasva tatsavitu vareniyam Bargo devasya limai Yona prachodaya Om Bhuvasva Tatsavitu Vareniyam Bargo Devasya Dhimai Iuyona prachodaya Umburvasva Tatsaviturvareniyam Bargo devasya dhimai Iuyona prachodaya Om Bhurvasva Tatsaviturvareniyam Bargo devasya dhimai Dhiyo yo prachodaya.
Now we're going to move into the main body of our presentation. And this is a quotation that relates directly to the April 11th Earth and solar eclipse. Would somebody in the group like to read this for us? Okay, Heidi. Awesome.
The eclipse of the moon and of the sun. I have already indicated to you the form that the religion, the universal spirituality of the new age will take. It will be built around the periods of the full moon, wherein certain great approaches will be made to the world of reality. Also around 2 periods of massed approaches to be made at the time of the major eclipse of the moon and of the sun during the year. The externalization of the hierarchy, according to Alice Bailey, page 55.
Thank you, Heidi. After this next quote that a friend of mine made on Facebook, I'm going to open the group to any sharing, any questions around their experiences during this eclipse. Would someone else like to read this little excerpt, this little commentary by Bonnie Orgren, which I thought, Gabriel?
The trans moon.
We lost you there. Gabriel, sorry you got cut off. Joe Garcia,
I am here.
thank you.
Duane, thank you. I just wrote this comment to post. Monday, there was a new moon solar eclipse in Aries. I'm still recovering energetically from the brief solar outage. The Sabian symbol for the lunation of 20 degrees of Aries was, according to Dane Rudder, a young girl feeding birds in winter, overcoming crises through compassion. He enlarges on this image by writing additionally that man can maintain the life of the spirit symbolically, symbolized by birds, steady through all crises if, like a young girl, he is widely open to the promptings of love and sympathy. Live potency in nature spirits reaches a higher level in the human being. I think that's live potency.
Thank you.
Reaches a higher level in the human being. The theme is the transmutation of life into love. There is so much division, conflict, and pain currently arising in the world, needing to be transmuted as we enter into a new era. Many feel discouraged and impotent in the face of obstacles and the resulting feelings of isolation. The rarity of this solar eclipse, its length and visibility, drew millions of citizens together to view it and share the experience. Collectively, we were united in our appreciation of our solar lights and the cosmos, stimulating love for our small planet and place in the universe. I viewed the eclipse from my patio and also on TV as one channel was following its path. I am glad that I was able via TV to witness the multitude of people who had gathered and also traveled to view it. Most, including the national commentators, were emotionally affected, in awe and moved to tears with a seeming new realization of their position on Earth and in the universe. It was a major initiatory experience for the citizens of the United States and will leave a potent legacy.
Thank you, Joe. It's an interesting paradox that during an eclipse of this nature, that two things can happen, and we're going to explore this in much greater detail a little further in our presentation. One, it can stimulate the lower elemental kingdoms, which have been shut off from any type of light, and they sort of run riot. And you can see that in your personality if you observe your emotions and your lower mind during an eclipse. But on the other hand, the moon, we know in esoteric astrology, veils Vulcan, which is a first-ray planet. Now, granted, this is on a fairly rarefied and elevated level, but the potential is there. And the moon is also associated with the fourth ray, more esoterically indicated. So now we're going to open up the forum, and I'd like any of those who feel moved to share maybe their experiences during this eclipse.
Hi, I raised my hand because I wanted to read earlier. I live in Australia, therefore I did not witness the eclipse, and therefore am not qualified to share right now. Thank you.
Okay. Peter? Peter, would you like to share? I see your hand raised.
JB raised her.
Okay. I'm going to let you handle the raised hands because I'm not getting the full view. Mike, is that going to
Yeah,
work
that's
for you?
fine.
Thank you.
JB.
Okay, hi. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
So this is Jessica Boivin speaking. I attended a previous seminar of yours, Duane. I thought I would share some insights from the eclipse. So where I was geographically located, I wasn't able to witness the full eclipse. That said, there have been and were and still are palpable shifts in energy building up to the eclipse, during it, and after, which directly correlate to the passage you just shared. So there have been a lot of observations of plays between focal points on darkness and light. And what is observed is that what has been observed during the eclipse portal in particular, I guess we're still kind of in it, that said, was if one were to focus, say, in the doom and gloom hallway, that would immediately propel one's energy system downward. And the particular passage you shared has been useful because when the sight is lifted, so during these plays of energies prior to this eclipse, it was more of a gradual shifting. And while the eclipse was approaching, up to and after, it seemed to be more immediate. So, for example, if one were to focus on, like I said, the negative aspects of what's occurring, say, for example, starvation or not having money or not having resources or the world problems, or even the sensitivity to energies around oneself was very noticeable, more so than ever before. Like a live wire almost, like the slightest of energetic imprints was noticeable and the slightest fluctuation. And it was, like I said, kind of instantaneously observed. The hope within that and the light within that and the test within that that was observed is exactly as this passage says, to feed some birds in the middle of winter. So to raise the sights above and upwards into the Ajna center, into the Christ center. So this was a concerted effort through this vessel anyway. At times it was seeming that there was no light and that it was just sheer darkness, and the most darkness perhaps that has been faced yet, to the point where it felt like there was no light and there wasn't going to be any. So anyway, that being said, I just wanted to kind of offer that experiential passage through it, and also to extend gratitude for everyone here, and that we're all experiencing it together. So yeah, hope
Yes.
that's of some help.
Excellent, Jessica. Where are you located geographically?
I'm located in North Bay, Ontario, Canada.
Okay.
So Northern Ontario.
And I think you've brought out some important ideas and intuitions. One doesn't have to be in the direct alignment of the solar Earth eclipse, because it's really a planetary event and it's happening across the entire globe. It may be the most intense with that small band, but it is pretty multi-dimensional. And the idea that energy follows thought is a key insight, because one should prepare themselves and make it into a meditation and not be the recipient of the lower aspect of it. So thank you, Jessica. Okay, anyone else like to share? I see some hands up. Mike?
Yeah, Peter.
Thank you. Yeah, I wasn't able to mute for some reason, but yeah, we are actually in exciting times. I guess to your point, Dwayne, I'm in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada, and I didn't experience the eclipse as well, but it's obvious that we've all shifted to one layer of expansion of consciousness, or you can say initiation. So I guess everyone has sort of like jumped to the next level. And this is my own personal experience. And I feel like there was, I mean, based on intuition, like you said, I feel that there was like a trial run before we went live, just to see how each one of us will experience that shift in consciousness a few weeks, I guess, before. And then we went live this week. But that said, for everyone who is sensitive, you feel that you've moved. I mean, for those who did not miss the Noah's Ark, the boat, we've all shifted to one layer higher in our soul initiation. Most predominantly, I would say that the masses or the average, humanity is moving from the 4D, sorry, for somewhere 4D or wherever it might be, to the 5D. And so that's moving from love wisdom. So the older generation came in with that love wisdom ray, and we're moving into truth. And so we'll see more of that being expressed in this new era. Thank you. That's my my own intuitive forecast. Thank you.
Excellent, Peter. You make some very good points about that shift. Anyone else like to share?
Eric.
Yes, I'd like to say what I experienced when I was in the totality of the eclipse. I found myself near Indianapolis, Indiana during the April 8th. So I got to see the actual full covering of the sun. And when it happened, it's a very surreal experience. It's like the energy felt very vibrating. It's like it was much more expected. I didn't expect it to be so energizing. Afterwards, I was like happy and feeling joyful. My wife said she felt a tremendous amount of positive energy coming from it. So I've been thinking about what caused that. And from a scientific point of view, you have the moon right there and the sun is hitting it directly. All the energy is hitting the moon and it's passing through the moon. We're not getting the visible light, but we're getting some other energy mixed with the moon being pushed from the sun's emissions. So I'm thinking, what is going on there that's hitting Earth and creating some kind of effect? So that's something I've been pondering.
Excellent, Eric. And as we move along in this presentation, I think we are going to address that very idea you have raised. What other energies are operating here that we may not be aware of? And we're going to look at it scientifically, and we're going to look at it occultly, because the two are actually saying similar things when you do the right research and you bring where certain scientific inquiry is, when you parallel it with astrology and astronomy, there's some amazing relationships. So thank you, Eric. Okay, anyone else?
Yeah, Joe.
It's I, Joe. For the group, I have Uranus at 20 degrees of Aries and my moon at 16. And I prepared for this eclipse well, we live in the Pacific Northwest, and we watched the NASA presentation for 90 minutes. And each time as the eclipse moved across the United States, we were involved. It was interesting to see how people along the route responded in the same way. I would say approximately halfway across the country, about the third or fourth time I saw the full eclipse, it felt as if my crown chakra was completely open and I was feeling energy from the base as well of the chakra system. I gasped at that point and I had a feeling that maybe just because I breathed in, but it felt like it was the heart that was the center of all of this. The interesting part for me, the difficult part for me, is that the crown remained open and is closing, but I am still feeling the energy of that openness. What is it now, 4 days later? It's dissipating. I think I'll get back to moving normally, but I'm a little unstable at this point.
Well, often we can undergo some powerful recognitions, and it can relate to initiation. Now, whether it's a major initiation or a minor one that's building up to one later. And in the study of Uranus, we know that the first ray is very dominant, but also the seventh ray is very prominent. And first ray, crown, seventh ray, base of the spine. There's a passage in the Tibetan's work where he points out that when you are serving selflessly and your heart is open to the plight of poor humanity looking down and the love of the hierarchy pouring from above, that fourth ray energy will descend to the base of the spine and it will stimulate that seventh ray energy in a new and more potent way. So, like all sudden shifts and changes, it's always good to reflect and to analyze, like you have clearly done, Joe, so that you can better grasp exactly what took place or is taking place. Sometimes the greatest opportunities can come with some personal discomforts, but that is just the result of the old elemental forces that are seated in our different sheaths, bodies, chakras, being driven out. And they often don't want to go. They want to pack their bags and they'll delay as long as possible. Thank you, Joe. That was an excellent share. Okay. Anyone else like to share?
Yes, this is Rose. My experience was very similar to what I experienced during the full moon cycles, which surprised me. And I felt like that point of tension leading up to the moment of totality, even though where I was located was not, I was in California, so it was not in the path of totality. There was like a peak time that was the maximum for my location was. And then after that, I felt like this release of tension and a greater sense of positivity and a very powerful, very stabilizing and deeply positive energy. And that's all.
Excellent. Thank you for that share. When new and dynamic energy enters into the disciple, a point of tension is created. Now there are different definitions of tension, but the one that I find the most relevant, at least to this comment that Rose has made and this presentation today, the tension is between the old and the new, between the Davic and angelic hosts whose cry has been heard by poor humanity, and they are descending in their ranks into groups like this and individual disciples that are now participating right here in this group. And there will be a point of tension. And the tension is creative. But with that tension, as I mentioned in the previous comments, there will always be some personality discomfort. And one of the greatest hindrances to initiation and spiritual development with the new age is the idea that when I make contact with my soul or some higher level of reality, all my issues are going to melt and all the difficulties are going to just dissipate. To the contrary, there'll be a temporary resistance by the elementals. And if you stay and stand steady in the light of this new Davic or this new angelic force, it will drive those elementals out. And then you will become either in one fell sweep or more than likely in small increments into the light of Christ. It's all done through Christ's light, working through the soul, working through the lesser centers. Thank you. That was excellent. Any additional comments?
Thank you. This is Heidi. I wanted to mention two things. One is the eclipse that happened in 2017, the total eclipse across our country, the United States, and that it had a crossing point where the other eclipse was. And one of the understandings that I've come to is that eclipses can compress energy or bring a compression, which is a way to experience it through the first ray or the force of this new energy that's wanting to come in. And as it creates that force and creates a kind of pressure within the organism or the systems, it actually, if you don't fight it, if there isn't a fighting resistance, which is what, is present, and you can hold steady in it, it increases the vibratory frequency within all of the layers that have been compressed. And through that vibratory response, if you can do it, as it's saying in this quotation of the transmutation of life into love, and it can be sensed, and it's really through that energy that is sensed as love rather than something else that was hanging on from the past. That's when the expression of life actually begins to change. It actually takes on these new forms and these new possibilities that begin to emerge out of this eclipse energy. And I'm just kind of sitting in the energy right now, aware of it and its vitality. Like there's a tremendous vitality that actually is present. And that holding steady that you were talking about feels mighty important right now for the higher expressions to come through that beautiful heart energy of the 7 rays that you were talking about. I mean, you've synthesized this talk to exemplify something that is quite magnificent. And I'm really grateful to be here in this moment.
Well, thank you, Heidi. That was very beautifully shared. And I can also attest to the sense of privilege that I should be able to work with such an amazing group of initiates and disciples that we all are. Your idea of compression is really an excellent word because you are being compressed. This point of tension I just mentioned is actually the compression of a higher rotating type of light, sound, vibration, and geometry. It's being impressed through compression into your auric field. So what that means is that you have to open yourself and be humble, be obedient to the soul's impulse, which is to let in more light and to have your emotions not so much driven out, but uplifted to the next higher subplane, because the emotions are the grounding of the Buddhic plane, just as the Buddhic plane is the grounding placement for the monadic level along the 246 line. And you have to stand steady in the light, in the pressure, in the tension, because your reward will be the result of that. There's a curious word the Tibetan used when he was describing the first ray and how it affects disciples. And he said, the first ray will grip you. And when I first read that, I thought, wow, that is such an odd description. It just sounds so sort of common. But when you get seized by the pressure and the creative tension of these higher levels, you feel like something is gripping you. Now, that makes some people feel uncomfortable because they think, oh, I don't want to get possessed, and oh, there's all these entities floating around. Hence, the value of group work. You become insulated not only by your good intent, but by the beauty and the truth and the sincerity of the group and the groups with which you work. They hold you up. And this meditation that we did on the 7 spokes of the wheel of love is actually more potent, according to DK, in purifying the lower person than even the 5-pointed star, which we all know is a symbol of the soul, the hierarchy, the White Lodge. So thank you. That was excellent. Any additional comments?
Yes, it's Stefan here. So I would like to share some experiences I had in the last few days. The Aries energies are very strong and opened up enormous channels to visions and dreams. And I'm one of those people that is in contact with several ashrams around the globe. So I have a contact to a variety of groups. And what was given to me on the eclipse night, the new moon night, was that on a global level, there is a critical mass of people now that have been purified and initiated enough to build a submarine, so to speak, to dive into the eternal waters of the soul, to purify and subdue what in biblical terms is called the Leviathan. So the Leviathan is some overdue, some problem that has been generated possibly in Atlantic times, and it's still mentioned in our scriptures. And now there's a moment when there's enough people that have been purified to subdue and tackle that in our soul life. I hope that makes sense. Thank you.
Well, I'd say that makes perfect sense. If you research the esoteric teachings of all world religions, they come to the same conclusion. They may use different language, they have different ethnic roots and historical trappings that they all have to deal with, but the reappearance of the Christ cannot take place until enough of the Christ's disciples, and we're talking about love here, not merely the historical Jesus or Christ, and it prepares the way for the reappearance of the Christ. And that has been affirmed over and over, that humanity must do its part. And I agree that we're approaching critical mass, and that may not mean everybody on the planet is going to be initiated, but I can guarantee you those who have prepared a place, those who have done the preliminary work, those who have kept, as the Christians speak of, as keeping the faith. There's blind faith and there's faith that sees. And when you get gripped and you feel that tension, you feel that pressure on your different vehicles, you have choices to make. Stand steady or retreat. And neither one is good or bad, but one will put you in a more optimal place to find your true sovereignty, as DK says, amongst the stars and not necessarily down here. Excellent share. Thank you. Anyone else like to share?
It's Joe again. And I just wanted to say, in line with what Stefan just said and what you said, that the unfolding for me has gotten to the point where it's a quote from Christ: I am the way, the truth, and the life.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
It's synchronous too.
It is.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
It's Ann Parker, and I just wanted to mention that leading up to the eclipse and prior to that, and I'm sure other people here have been doing the same, but remembering that Master DK says in times of crisis, we can spiritually demand help from the hierarchy. And so during these times of war and strife and crisis, in my meditation, I've been doing that. And as I said, I'm sure other people have in other groups. So I found myself during these strong energies of the eclipse wondering if some aid might be coming through, and that will remain to be seen. But I just wanted to share that thought. Thank you.
When you look out at the world as it now exists, sort of in contemporary terms, it's very easy to become dismayed and depressed and out of sorts because there's so much evil and craziness. But the forces of light, they take their stand and they're immovably rooted. And all these other lesser elemental forces, which appear to be like the only program in town, they are worn away by the light. They're either redeemed and lifted to a higher level, or they're driven off this planet to inhabit one that will be redeemed in later cycles. This idea of being obedient is a term that Tibetan uses, and it's so relevant. And he's not referring to obedience to some particular group or to another person or some teacher. It's remaining open to the downflow of the soul's directives and allowing the soul's will to transform and direct your personal will. You know, in the Ageless Wisdom teachings, the Tibetan says that we need to redefine the idea of sacrifice for the age of Aquarius that we're moving into. And I'm sort of paraphrasing him now when he says sacrifice in the age of a Pisces is like, oh, I'm going to give up more to get less. He says that's not the true interpretation of sacrifice. True sacrifice is you temporarily let go of the old self as you take over the new person in Christ. Where is the loss there? Where is the sacrifice? And those things that have bothered you and have kept you from moving forward, they don't die because you beat them up. They go away because A, you either transmutate them or they die of attrition. The light wears them down and they cease to exist. And we have to remember that obedience is to the soul and not to any philosophy, not any occult series of truths, but to the soul as it impresses itself upon us right now, historically, right now at this hour, this minute, in this group. Obedience to the light within. Okay, I'm going to take one more and then we're going to move on. Excellent. I am so excited about these comments.
Hi, Duane. This is Peter. I was going to collaborate the comment you made in regards to the fact that the inevitability of progress is sure, because sometimes we tend to look at things only from the individualistic perspective and not the collective or the microcosm. And when we think about our whole civilization from an evolutionary perspective, we can see, to your point, that it's moving upwards in consciousness. And it's like a child that, stands and, falls and, crawls and then begins to walk and eventually starts to run. But the process of the collective is more of self-realization. And that's what you're referring to when you say obedience. It's like the collective is becoming more self-realized, and obedience essentially meaning listening to the higher mind. Because we have the lower mind, which is the unconscious human nature, animal nature, material form, vegetable, whatever form it is. And that's unconscious. And obedience meaning listening to the higher mind that is conscious and is universal. And so as the collective being, one universal thing moves from a place of being unconscious, walking and crawling and falling, it then becomes more self-realized and becomes a full, mature, divine thing, attaining to perfection. So yeah, it's inevitable that self-realization is the path of evolution. Thank you.
That's excellent, Peter. This analogy of how our children go through these different stages. And we simply recapitulate on the next higher level. And the soul, no doubt, is recapitulating something on its high level right on up and through to the cosmic, astral, and mental planes. Okay, so now we're going to move into the next phase of the presentation. And This is a quote by Alice Bailey that is relevant to where we're now moving. The science of the soul in its various aspects, mental, psychical, and spiritual, is making much headway now in the world and is absorbing more and more the attention of thinkers. This is the result of certain waves of energy impinging upon our solar system and thus eventually finding their way to our planet. Now, what we're moving into is a real clarification about solar eclipses and why there can be these cosmic forces behind this that are simply not relevant, and certainly not relevant even to contemporary astrologers. Unless you're trained in esoteric astrology, it's going to be difficult to understand certain changes taking place. Okay, we're coming up for the 2025 Shambhala impact. And what are the four most important star systems or constellations filtering through our own solar logos at this time and given by DK that have a direct influence on our planetary life and all the kingdoms of nature at this time? We got the Great Bear, Ray 1, Sirius 2, Pleiades 3, and Draco Ray 7. Now, there are others, but these are the key ones that the Tibetan gives. And then he says, to these would be added other streams of energy which definitely play upon and affect our planetary life, such as those coming from the great star Betelgeuse or from Antares and other stupendous suns in solar systems. Okay, I may, for time respect, shorten a few of these quotes. Okay, early theories about our solar activity indicated that plasma, which is electrical and magnetic, streaming in from higher cosmic sources, never really affected our planet or Earth very extensively, because when impacting the sun, these powerful cosmic radiations became deflected at the poles because of the vast plasma shields that surround the sun. And the Earth has its different shields, its electrical and magnetic and plasma shields on a lesser level. Now, new research by NASA and astronomical research in scientific circles indicate that this is not entirely accurate, what I just read. It is now believed that cosmic rays flowing into our sun can also become pinched at the sun's equator and therefore shoots cosmic rays directly out and in line with all the planets in our solar system. There's an analogy here between the sun and the moon eclipse, but now we're looking at this on a much higher level. Okay. All suns have an active electric and magnetic plasma shield that insulates them from powerful cosmic forces. When the sun is in a solar minimum, cosmic rays can pass around or through this weakened protective plasma shield and directly impact the planets in our solar system. When impacting the Earth, this in turn will affect all life in the different kingdoms. We stand on the threshold of a new superhuman physics that will be based on two sciences: the science of esoteric astrology, which is ancient, and the science of electricity, which is relatively new. In the merging of these two sciences, many deep and profound insights into the universe and our place within it will be understood. There'll be a little repetition here, but repetition is good because this is a concept that is really very misunderstood in the occult circles. Okay, we are in a cycle of a solar maximum that is within an even greater cycle of a solar minimum. Grand solar minima occur when several solar cycles exhibit lesser than average activity for decades or centuries. Solar cycles still occur during these grand solar minimum periods, but are at a much lower intensity than usual. The grand minima form a special mode of the solar dynamo operation. Okay. Now, this is a chart on solar maximum and solar minimum cycles from 1761 to pretty much the present. This might actually be about 6 months old. So it's not 100% accurate, but it's very, very close. So if you look at these peaks and troughs, you'll see that the solar maximums were in 1778, 1848, recently, like in 1960, right around 1960, 1958, you'll see solar spots and flare activity was at its highest peak. Anybody here born around that time? Well, maybe you came in to enjoy the boatload of cosmic energies that are now precipitating onto the planet. Okay, from 1968, looking at this blue chart, it has slowly diminished to where we are now, which is 2024. And we are in a solar maximum, but in a solar minimum when the big picture is seen. So going back to what I just recently quoted and shared, our sun is at one of its lowest points of energy for a long period of time. And the result of that, and I apologize for being redundant, but this is so important, these cosmic forces that I just outlined that Alice Bailey shared with us, they now can pour in unimpededly. They pass right through our solar logos because his or her or it, whatever you conceive it to be, their shields are down and they're undergoing some type of initiation. It's difficult to understand that, like in a solar maximum, all kinds of weird stuff happens. Communications get shut down, electricity goes haywire. And so it often relates to this thought form of like a doomsday scenario. And this can be true when you look at this sun and moon eclipse. There's a lot of people that were saying, oh, this is the end of the world, if you went on Facebook, or all these bad things are going to happen. Yes, potentially bad things do happen when elementals are stimulated, but on a much higher level, if you're a disciple, you are getting the pressure. You are getting that creative point of tension that drives not just the individual, not just the group, but the whole planetary life in all of the kingdoms forward. Here's another chart that simply is a little more accurate than the other one, because it's brought right up to date, and it's done by NOAA. And see where it says on the right-hand bar at the very bottom, 2024, look, we're in a solar maximum compared to other times, but overall, it's a solar minimum. And when I first was exposed to this solar minimum maximum, I couldn't quite, it was hard for me to grasp. I was thinking, oh, when the sun is the most potent, we're going to get the most energy. Yes, but only on a certain level. When it's in its minimum, wacko, all these energies pour in. Okay. Here's a description. I think this is from, NASA. We are well below the average number of sunspots at this time, which typically range from 140 to 220 sunspots per solar cycle. And shortly, I'm going to open this up so we can dig into it and see if we can wrap our minds around the sort of the technicalities of this. This is, I found, very interesting. This was actually from our government site that somebody else, the Escaped Surf, good thing he escaped to share this with me. Scientists have developed a new prediction of the shape of the bubble surrounding our solar system using a model developed with data from NASA missions. The shape of the heliosphere is more than a question of academic curiosity. The heliosphere acts our solar system shield against the rest of the galaxy. Energetic events in other star systems like supernova can accelerate particles to nearly the speed of light. These particles rocket out in all directions, including into our solar system. But the heliosphere acts as a shield. It absorbs 3/4 of these tremendous energetic particles called galactic cosmic rays that would make their way into our solar system. Those that do make it through can wreak havoc. Now, this is NASA, and this is sort of the conventional dynamic. And it is wreaking havoc. These powerful energies are uprooting and knocking down and reconstituting the situation that we all know needs to be improved and radically changed. Okay, I thought the group would find that of some interest. Rocketing in our directions. This is condensed from a commentary by Anna. Is she here today? Anna Scala. Thank you, Anna, for putting this together and sharing it on Facebook. Cosmic rays are very high frequency light waves that have been shown to potentially transform human DNA, thus affecting human evolution. In fact, an analysis of ice samples taken from the polar stations of Greenland and the Antarctica have shown that some 12,000 years ago and 34,000 years ago, there was an incredible increase in cosmic rays. Scientists were surprised to find that both times corresponded to periods of great leaps in human evolution in terms of art and technology. The effect on cosmic rays on our own genetics can lead to mutations in the body, the mind, and in the brain, and could also alter our perceptions of reality. Cosmic rays are passing through the earth and our body all the time due to environmental processes of the cosmos and solar minimums. The effect on cosmic rays on our own genetics can lead to mutations in the body, the mind, and in the brain, and also alter our perceptions of reality. In 1987, a supernova occurred close enough to Earth that it was so powerful that it was visible to the naked eye. So what we're delving into here is it's not just the important constellations and star systems that the Tibetan has outlined, but now at this time, historically, it is other factors. And one of them is supernovas. In 1987, a supernova occurred close enough to Earth that it was so powerful that it was visible to the naked eye. A supernova is a rare stellar explosion so powerful that its radiation can briefly outshine an entire galaxy, releasing as much energy in a flash as our sun is expected to emit in its lifetime. A shift in human consciousness is occurring, employing celestial triggers such as supernova and the Earth's alignment with the galactic center, as well as other star systems and constellations that we have earlier outlined. The triple effect of solar minimums. And we've covered this, and so I'm just going to skip over this part. It stimulates the involutionary substance inherent in the three lower vehicles of humanity that demand recognition and will be eventually transmutated. And now this is an interesting one just coming out of COVID. It stimulates bacteria, viruses, and pathogens inherent in the earth, which are drawn to the surface that have hitherto lain dormant. And we're not going to go off onto a tangent with COVID-19, but I have written a book on this subject that can be found at my Lightweaver site called COVID-19 in the Ageless Wisdom Teachings, where I researched some of the key masters and initiates and what they said on the subject of vaccines and pandemics and flus and all these different things that we're still in, but we went through it terribly a few years ago with the onset of this COVID-19. Okay, excellent. So now we're going to open this up to the group, and if there's any additions that somebody would like to make, feel free to comment, or any questions. I realize I've given you a lot, and I apologize for that, but this group can assimilate it very quickly.
Yeah, can I want to go through the text comments and then Peter.
Okay, excellent.
So Joe said that solar discussion suggests a sensitive point in the back of the head, directly opposite the third eye. This point appears to be involved in the vertigo I've been experiencing since the eclipse.
You may be referring to, Joe, the Alta Major Center, which is seated in the back of the skull down below, sort of close to the nape of the neck. And that Alta Major Center synthesizes all of the personality and energies below the diaphragm. It purifies them, draws them up, and then from the Alta Major Center, they go to the ajna and to the higher crown, or the 12-petal lotus of the divine jiva or ego that's seated within the crown center. Thank you. That's excellent.
And then Stefan said the 87 supernova had a baby. You can find pictures on the web. I'll find some links and post that in a minute. And
Cool.
then Anna, the Aries Libra axis, an alignment that spotlights the dynamic interplay between the self and the other. Aries, the first sign of the zodiac, represents the spark that initiates life, individual consciousness, and the birth of individuality, the fiery urge for self-assertion and a pioneering spirit. Libra, on the other hand, represents balance, harmony, and the art of relationship. Through Libra, we enter the social sphere and begin to learn how to relate to others as equals. Together, these signs invite us to explore the balance between our personal desires and the needs of engaging in cooperative diplomacy.
That's awesome. Anna, thank you so much. That really does outline the work to be done. Finding the balance and utilizing that powerful Aries 6 in first ray, but eventually merging the Libran group, mind, heart. Thank you.
Peter.
Thanks, Michael. Duane, I have a speculation. I just need your input and your comment on. And so when I think about existence itself as a whole, I think of like a universal soul. And then I think of our solar system, or, if we even drew a little to our stars as a chakra within this body of this universal soul. And so when this universal soul is going through its own initiations, it's going to transcend through everything within the galaxy, or within the multiple galaxies that we have. And so again, when our sun or our star or chakra begins to go through ascension, that energy is going to be transmuted or translated to the earth, so that the earth then also sheds its own illusion, because the earth then also has to ascend. So I think looking at the whole of existence from this collective universal soul going through its own microcosmic evolutionary cycles or ascension, we can see how that transcends to be the smallest energy center within the body of this universal being. I'm not sure, if that's a logical analogy, and I would just like to hear your comment or your input on that analogy. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I would say, first of all, initiation for the disciple and for the groups that are emerging on a planetary level, this is all the result of what's happening on much higher levels. We, in our initiatory status, are the byproduct of greater lives that you have clearly alluded to, Peter, that are undergoing initiation. And the lesser is always included in the greater, even if the lesser may not be aware of it. And if you study the ageless wisdom, it sort of tells you what's coming and how you can best vantage yourself to take advantage of these vast, powerful energies that are pouring in. But average humanity, they will get there too. It'll just take longer, and they'll go through more bouncy ups and downs and crises, because evidently that's what they need. They need to work on personality integration, whereas it's very clear to me that people who would come to this type of presentation have done most of this work in earlier cycles. And that's not to say we shouldn't be diligent and continue with our transmutative work on all our lower personality vehicles, but you wouldn't even be here if a lot of this preparatory work hasn't taken place. So your speculations are, to me, correct, Peter, and I appreciate there's 7 sources of cosmic energy pouring in, and I mentioned, I think, 6 or 7 of them in our previous quote. And they make up the body, if I remember correctly, the one who may not be said, who's some great being whose centers are these constellation and star centers. Just as we have our centers in our body, in our sheaths, they have theirs, but they're so stupendous that, again, they're given the name, the one whom not may be said. Anyway, fascinating. Okay, any additional comments?
Yeah, I'm also gonna post a link to an article, a post on Lucis Trust that talks about the 2020 cosmic ray detection, which was the highest, or linked to Amaterasu, the Japanese goddess. Most powerful cosmic rays ever detected struck Earth's atmosphere in 2021. If you want to read about that.
Yes, please post that link. I would
Just
definitely like to read about that. And you're seeing this in numerous departments.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
No. Were you done? Numerous
No, I am
departments?
done. Thank you.
Okay. JB?
Hi, can you all hear me?
I can.
Okay. There was a point that was going to be brought through, and I'm left in awe and gratitude because this group is so sensitive that Peter naturally touched on it. In other words, that said, through a quick meditation and check-in, I'll attempt to bring it forth, which is the idea that as a conscious soul, or a being that is becoming more conscious, a soul that is expanding in consciousness, rather, we have the perception that we are initiating great changes, and our soul is likened externally to that of the solar logos, if I'm not mistaken. So, yeah, okay. So it's intriguing to the mind to conceptualize that the solar maximum is in direct correlation with that which we are all bringing forth through our meditations and initiations. And now to realize that there's a solar minimum occurring on an upper octave is very intriguing as well. And the point that had been brought forth, which Peter also stated, which is that there are greater beings and greater levels of consciousness at play. So it's again the idea that we are a point in the, eye of God, if you will, in the realm of consciousness, of which there are many points. So yeah, I just left with some gratitude and appreciation and awe for the cycles and cycles and cycles of it all, and the expansiveness and sheer magnitude of what we're all undertaking. And there's also another point which ties into an earlier point from this seminar with regards to love, and how if we choose to exist as love and unite with consciousness, then it'll accelerate the expansion, and likely the solar activity, and perhaps make it easier in a way. So, yeah.
Thank you, Jessica. Excellent. Share. If we are not left with a degree of wonder and awe, then I ask everyone, are we just going through the motions? Are we just, excuse me, memorizing and reading out of books? And I apologize. I've been so imbued with all these teachings. I feel the need to correlate them with what a fifth degree master is saying. But when you really study DK or any master, ultimately, all roads lead to unconditional love and the will of the Father. And even a whiff of either one of those will turn the greatest skeptic into the littlest child, where we can open our eyes and see the beauty and the mystery of existence and feel it passing through us. The soul, our group brothers and sisters, the entire group. The entire group is here for you. We're not really isolated, living in different parts of the planet. We're really one and inhabiting one life. And you're going to see more and more groups like this forming, as you obviously participate in now. Because the time is not just for individuals to come together as a group, but for groups who are notoriously known for their inability to get along with other groups, for them to come together, put their egos down, and see the greater good that needs to be done. See the changes and the transmutation that only many groups can do. So thank you. Any additional comments?
Yeah, Nisa.
Yes, I was looking, excuse me, at this number 2 point about the pathogens coming up out of the earth, and it reminded me of several different articles that I've read over the past few years about the permafrost melting and releasing pathogens that have not been, have lain dormant, And also what came to mind is medically new studies recently are talking about the importance of the gut biome. And so I think it's important not to see this as, COVID-19 was not fun, but it's important to see this also. There's these new things don't have to just be all things to be afraid of. And there's transformation in it, even the virus and the bacteria that, and I think it's really important to stand, I'll say, in spirit. And like you were just saying, to join in group and hold in love for humanity that so often now is the first instinct is, to be in fear about everything. And I think it's really important to do, just like you were saying, to join as individuals in all these groups that everyone here belongs to, and to join in love, not separate, but know the oneness of us all. Anyway.
Beautifully shared, Nisa. Standing in the spirit in relationship to microbes and the permafrost. This is releasing all these different gases into the atmosphere that are going to affect the planetary life. I recall seeing about a year ago an article that showed this inland area that was totally submerged by this high water mark. And it is obviously the result of the water rising in oceans and different places. And it was a cemetery. And as you looked out over the picture that went with the commentary, there were these hundreds of caskets floating. And I recall the Tibetan saying that when we check out and go to the other side, we make the great transition, that our bodies should be cremated. And the reason for that is because a decaying body has many potential illnesses and viruses that you're just putting back in the earth. And who knows, 100 years from now, or 50 years from now, or 10, somebody could be digging in that area, or it could get into the water supply, or it could just be indiscriminately floating around out there in the bay. So it all comes down to what DK shared in this quote. He said, the only cure for occult corruption is occult fire. And I think what he meant is that whatever level we have difficulty, whether it's fear in our emotional, physical ailments, through whatever reason, a mind that's under stress and is not able to make the transition over to the soul's vantage point, you have to find what is the unique approach, what is your ray, your astrological information that can create not just a chart, but a meditation that will allow you to deal with all this weird stuff that's taking place on the physical plane. And it is, yes, often very overwhelming. But again, when you take your refuge in what the Buddhists call the great law, or the Christians call the living Christ, you insulate yourself from the ravages of all kinds of diseases and discomforts and psychological pain. Thank you. Any additional comments?
Yeah, let me get some text ones and then go back to the hands. Diana said the scientific recognition that cosmic rays affect the DNA of our planetary life is an indication that these extra cosmic beings such as Ursa Major, Sirius, Pleiades, etc. could even prepare our vehicle to make them optimal instruments to carry a higher consciousness.
Beautifully shared, Diana. We must make ourselves optimally available. Is it possible that the soul is much closer than we think? And I realize I'm sort of using inept words here, because the soul is not a thing that hovers around you waiting to drop in when you're a good person. It's a state of consciousness. But bear with me. Is it possible that these vast forces in the universe are much closer than we think or realize? and that part of this training found here in however a minimal way and in other groups is to help you realize, and DK said this when in one of his books, I think it's Raise Initiations, he said that through about 25, 30 pages, he outlines the work that must be done through building the Antakarana Bridge. You go from point A to point B to C, D, you do this, you do that, and it's beautifully constructed. It's a scientific map of the way home. But then after having said that, he says, but you know, the Antakarana doesn't really exist. It's a figment of imagination created by people who have built this bridge, and it's a thought form. And he says it's a necessary one because people operating solely out of the lower mind, they need the sequential building of the lower mind. But like many in this group, and I apologize if I appear to be assertive, they know that the mind can hold them back, and they have been working on it, not for just this lifetime, but perhaps a number of lifetimes. Working on the astral body, bringing it up subplane by subplane, working on the mental body, subplane by subplane, and then crossing over into the soul light, the master's radiance, and it is much closer than we can think in our minds. It can be as close as breathing, but if we're not trained to recognize it, maybe it doesn't exist for all practical purposes. This is a curious thing that we're trying to put into words here, but I think most of you get it. Okay, another comment?
Yeah, Eric.
Yes, I can't remember what I would comment on something earlier, but we just said there, Duane. I was curious if you heard of the Merkaba, because what you described sounds something like that. And is that the same idea?
Every religious tradition has its way out of illusion and glamour. And the Merkaba has several interpretations, but the most esoteric that I have come to is sort of in the Jewish tradition of the prophets, and I've forgotten which prophet it was that spoke about the chariot with the flaming wheels, and it's spoken of as the divine chariot, the Merkaba. It takes you heavenly, it takes you upward. And it's not something you can sit in and drive like a car. It's the forward moving of your yearning, your demand for liberation, and the agent that you're trying to contact, some higher spiritual level, responding. This is what invocation, evocation is. You send out a cry, a plea, a demand, not just personally, but from the high mental plane, and then you get a response. The soul will not contact its instrument unless the instrument has done certain preparatory moves. I hope that was
Interesting.
helpful, Eric.
It was, thank you. That's very helpful to understand that better. I remember the comment I wanted to make earlier. It was about, I forget who was mentioning this, but the Earth is trying to evolve. The air and everything on the Earth is an evolutionary cycle as well, and we are just on it as a hitchhiker, I guess you could call it. We tend
We
to
ourselves. Go ahead.
We personally tend to think we are the most important thing on Earth, and I feel like that's not the way we should be thinking.
Well, that is what leads to separation and what I would call, for lack of a better phrase, the rape of the Divine Mother, where people see it as just a way to make money. They excavate it, they manipulate it, and it is a living being. It's sort of like taking your hand and extending it and finding one little cell, and that cell thinks it's hot stuff. It thinks it's running the whole show. And you're up here looking at it saying, you poor pathetic thing. You're just a cell in this great being, and you are not going to get or go anywhere until you conform to the requirements of initiation. We are all cells in this great being, and the human kingdom is the throat center of our planetary logos, just as the hierarchy, which does operate on other levels, but in relationship to the earth, it's where love is found. In Shambhala, where the will of God is found. We are mere cells, and that is offensive to some people who think they are the center of the universe, as you have pointed out, Eric. But the recognition that we are insignificant on one level is critical to the recognition that we are really important on another level. And this is not some philosophical sophistry. This is a statement of fact. You give up the sense of you're the center of the universe on a personality level to find out that you are, as Rumi would say, and I know this is heresy to some people, but he used to go out in the marketplace and say, I am God, I am God. And all these people would hover around him and be bewildered. How can a man be God? Well, no man or woman or person can be God, but when you are in that state of total acceptance, of unconditional love, pouring down from the Buddhic and the monadic level, it's possible to make that enunciation, which to you internally is true. And perhaps I should say, we should say linguistically, I am at one with God. But there are mystics who are so enamored and so fused with those cosmic principles, they're called masked. They wander around in India and with a begging bowl. And that's not our goal here, certainly. But to get there with the personality equipment still intact. Thank you. That was beautifully shared. Eric, any additional comments?
This is Heidi again, and I just want to acknowledge something that just keeps coming back to me around what you have on the about the solar minimums, and also the Ray 1 and that force and being gripped by that force, and that if all of the lower bodies become gripped by that force, then what really I sense and have this deep awareness of is that yes, it will bring these things up to the surface only to be purified or to be transmuted if that steady presence is held. And when it is held in the energy of that Christ energy. And that Christ energy actually becomes the healing force. It becomes the transmutational force. And it becomes the interconnecting force that brings about the universality of laws to be understood, and then actually the potential to live them becomes clear to the humanity as one, rather than one person influencing another, it starts to recognize the vehicle of humanity begins to recognize itself as that energy. And it can look a lot of different ways, but it's that recognition of consciousness, that it remembers that it has this purpose that's living, that wants to live through us. I don't know if I said that right, but this has been a really beautifully enriched discussion, and it is creating a vibration in the field of humanity. That it feels very clear to me, and I feel very grateful to be part of it. And I feel really grateful to the downpouring that is actually occurring because of the attention that we're bringing to the hierarchy. So thank you, Duane, and thank everybody for the deepest attention that is coming forth. It is a beauty to be to be seen in the depth of life. Thank you.
That was an excellent and beautiful share. This idea of living through us is very apt. There are beings who we constitute cells in their bodies. And there are cells within our bodies that are also striving and struggling to pass through all the lower kingdoms to become human. At the center of every atom in the universe is this welling up, this emergence of love. Imagine that we're all in the 5th grade, and unlike conventional Orthodox school, where some people who don't quite make the grade stay back and the others go forward. Imagine that we're all in the same grade, relatively speaking, and not one in that entire group can leave that group until, through the law of sacrifice, through patience and unconditional love, every person in the group is transmutated and lifted up. It could change the whole idea of relationships. And I think this is what people are beginning to slowly realize. You can't do it alone. That doesn't mean you have to be codependent on someone else. It doesn't mean that you are not your own son, as Gurdjieff said, but that we openly, lovingly seek communications with those who have many gifts to give, just as we do. And I have used this quote before, but it's so relevant, by the great mystic and occultist, I might add, Gurdjieff, who came here at the turn of the century, and he astonished his disciples one day by stating, "Let us help lift the common burden of our Father in heaven by getting our shit together." And when I first read that when I was a teenager, I thought, what? We, insignificant drones, these little amoebas way down here, if there is such thing as God, how could we possibly elevate or lift the burden of our common Father in heaven? Is it possible that the Christ, and you got to look at this as a universal ideal, and I'm putting it in very frail human terms, is it possible that the members of the hierarchy, that the members of Shambhala, that all these great beings cannot go to their next level until they have helped redeem all the lower kingdoms of which we in the human kingdom are an intimate part. How would that change things? Okay, we're going to take one more comment and then we're going to close with a meditation.
Okay, so let me just say these two as just comments and then one other one. Thank you for all the discussions today. The Ecliptic One helped me so much for clarification of what I experienced. Janet and Magda on DK saying that love will open eyes before starting to interact more actively with the cosmic intelligence and realizing how the love net entangles everything. I couldn't in any way imagine the extent of magic that all moves. Not till I witnessed how Bodhisattva's compassion, beauty, calm, and all-around perfection, how we study in literature, walks on earth with me and us.
Beautiful. Thank you. So true. Okay. Did you have any other ones that you needed to share, Mike, before we go on?
Trying to,
Take your time.
there's a lot, but I'm trying to balance it.
And I appreciate people making these comments because even if I do not see them all, and I usually, Rose records them and I do review them afterwards, but if I miss any, the energy and the intention you have put into it is not missed by the group. And it has contributed to the wealth.
So two more since these people have shared. Vivian, in literature, Dante's Divine Comedy, written 700 years ago, speaks to the love that moves all. A commentary by Bark Vernon is available on his website that brings this to life to our modern minds.
Yes, Dante, awesome.
And Anna, angels respond to the prayers when we pray. Heaven moves, and angels of fire are dispatched from the throne room of God. The angels receive the prayers of the people and help to distribute the answers from heaven back to the earth in the form of fire.
Excellent.
Two people have their hands raised, but I think that
we're coming close to the end and I want to do the meditation, but thank you for supervising this and for those.
So we can move to the meditation then. We're good.
Yes. My cursor doesn't seem to be able to move the slides forward. Okay. We are going to skip this section, but we will come back to it on our next program. And we're going to close with the formula for group initiation that the Tibetan gives in one of the Dina books. Very powerful. And we've no doubt shared this before, but this is not the same group as before. Each person here is not the same person. Therefore, We are open to new possibilities through our individual and group meditations. Formula 4 concerns dynamic energy and is the basis of the true Laya Yoga. This yoga deals ever with the point within the circle and its relation to other points which condition the evolutionary process. One of the themes is neither time nor space exist. Formula 4 has a specific effect upon the jewel in the lotus, awakening it to life. This it does through effects produced upon the three planes of the three worlds, thus bringing about changes in the 7 wheels or centers, so that the dynamic point at the center of each wheel obliterates the lesser points of force, and thus the wheel begins to turn upon itself. This formula is presented in the form of a symbol, one which is in such constant movement that it is most difficult to describe or to make it live. Make it live before you. There lies before the investigator a square or oblong composed of a kaleidoscope mass of inchoate colors, moving, pulsating, and in constant, indescribable confusion. Superimposed upon this square is a radiant sun with a penumbra composed of the 7 prismatic colors. These radiate from the sun in regular rhythmic bands and produce a marvelous blaze of color. The background of the square appears to have its confusion of colors shown of a heavy, brilliant kind and quality. The scheme of beauty emerging, even if it appears as superimposed, is translucent and delicate and radiantly living in hue. The heavier background can be distinctly seen through the translucence. This formula differs according to the polarization of the one who visions it and who studies it. If he is focused in the personality and is therefore conditioned by his personality ray, one type of energy will impinge upon his consciousness. If he is soul conscious and soul focused, another type of energy will have its effect. Thus, 2 different pictures will emerge. Both will be correct, but the interpreting agent will be different. And so just before we enter into this group formula, I want everyone to withdraw from their lower mind and move into the feeling nature, which leads to the intuition. The mind is there, but it's temporarily put into abeyance. And let your breathing synchronize with this video, deep and rhythmic breaths. So with that, let us begin.
Bargo devasya limai Dio yona prachodaya Savitrovareniyam Bargo Devasya Dimai Diyo Yona Prachodaya Om Bhuvasvaha Tatsavitrovareniyam Bargo Devasya Dimai Diyo Yona Prachodaya Om Bhuvasvaha Tatsavitrovareniyam Bargo Devasya Dimai Diyo Yona Prachodaya Om Bhuvasvaha Tatsavitrovareniyam Bargo Devasya Dimai Diyo Yona Prachodaya. Bhuvasvaha Tatsavitrovareniyam Bargo Devasya Dimai Diyo Yona Prachodaya Om Bhuvasvaha Tatsavitrovareniyam.
Would anyone like to share from the short meditation? Go ahead, JB.
Oh, this very altered conscious moment. That said, I'm being urged to speak. As you see it, it sees you.
Beautiful. Because it's a two-way street. That which is descending meets in the divine marriage of that which is ascending. And the material and the spiritual become one. And everything in between is lost to that glory unspeakably. Anyone else like to share?
Maria says, I'm speechless. Lenny says, the universal mind. Janet says, I closed my eyes and viewed through my ajna. It was fantastic. Stefan says, aha, we have been seen. And Francis has something to say.
Francis has something.
Yes, just very quickly in that beautiful short meditation that you finish with, and at the beginning when you open with, the Gayatri mantra, known as the mother of all mantras in the Vedic tradition, is also a tremendously protective mantra when in times of need or just in general. It can be used for tremendous protection of all of our bodies.
Excellent. This is so true. And as the introduction to this outlined, not everyone will get the same download, and yet the download that you get is correct for you. And we may do this meditation a number of times because it's not something I artistically simply pull together because I have a fervent imagination, which I can assure everyone I do possess, but it's as close as I can approximate to what he was attempting to describe back 100 years ago when there were not the modern technological tools to sort of bring it more to life. Yes, granted, the symbol is not the thing itself, but it can become a useful tool or a doorway to enter through as you go to the reality it veils. Thank you, Francis. Anyone else like to share as we close?
Yeah, I was gonna say that just the level of peace and it's like a fusion of wisdom, love, and peace. I appreciate the time. I appreciate the I'm new to the group, but I appreciate the fact that I'm part of this community. Thank you.
Thank you. Wisdom, love, and peace. That sure summarizes it. Heidi?
Just dancing light with every atom, and like it all is finding its way. Everything finds its way through that dancing light, and nothing is left behind that doesn't need to return.
That is so poetic and yet occultly accurate. Thank you. Anyone else?
It's Joe.
Joe?
Duane, at the last 5 seconds, maybe it seemed to me that the ring passed not, the square dissipated, and everything began to flow. As first I saw it as a shape of a skull, and then it just kind of went everywhere.
Thank you. The personality is symbolized as the square. And curiously and paradoxically, we have to square things. We have to square them up to comprehend them in the early stages. But as the soul, the hierarchy, the master's love, and profound will emerge, the square is blotted out. It doesn't cease to exist. It takes, to quote the Tibetan, its rightful place in the hierarchy of things. There's nothing wrong with the personality. And even though it may be giving certain people grief in their lives right now, it's the single best thing that you have. It ensouls a physical body and it's redeeming that physical body. There's a curious group of, I'm trying to think of the technical name, that work the Kumaras. There's 7 Kumaras, 3 that the Tibetan talks about extensively, but the 5th Kumara, he does mention that Kumara's main purpose on this planet, this great being, is to connect people's physical brain with their etheric brain. In other words, when you watch this, when you listen to this mantric Gayatri and you visually watch the unfolding of the video, which is the sun undulating, translucent, doing all these things that the Tibetan describes, however inadequately, it is connecting not just the higher bodies with the lower bodies, but the physical brain with the etheric brain. And what you saw, Joe, at the very end was all this energy pouring into this illuminated skull or brain. And that was a brain. And it rotates, and you see the synapses in the electricity, and then it dissipates. I'm not sure if I did that well enough for people to sense that the objective is not to get high, not to get in alignment with all these cosmic principles without a plan of how to ground it in the everyday world with our friends, with our colleagues, our co-workers, with the groups with which we work. And that's why it ends on a sort of an odd note. Okay, any additional comments?
One more text one. He says JB pointing out that it was 4-4 when she made that statement about as you see it, it sees you. Two more statements now. Great synthesis from Anna. Great synthesis, standing together as one. In unified assembly, we consciously participate in the great cosmic descent of energies from on high through the great chain of being, streaming its life to our souls and through all the kingdoms of nature. And then Lenny points out 2222 is the period of the birth of the Cancer Kumara cycle, nourishing the lives.
Thank you, Lenny. And thank you for the beautiful music you constantly feed me with over Facebook. Awesome.
And
Okay.
Louise, one more. Louise.
Okay, Louise, you're on. You may be muted.
Well, I'm trying. Asked her to unmute a few times now. You can also unmute yourself now. The settings is set, so. And you're unmuted now.
Okay, thank you. I want to thank you for this experience. I didn't say anything, but at the time of the eclipse, what I experienced was a fullness. It was extreme fullness. And over this period of time, there has been an opening and a dispersion of energy. And there was something that was just recently said that I raised my hand, but between then and now, I forgot it. So all I can say is thank you. Oh, I know what it was. When I closed my eyes during this meditation, I was able to still see the image very vividly. I don't know if it was my third eye or I don't know what it was. All I know is I was able to see the image internally. So I will take this into my meditation. And then when I opened it, it was an emergence, or the word emergence came. So I'm blending that word in with what I physically experienced during the solar eclipse. And all I can say is thank you. And as we all are, I'm on this process. I'm in this process.
One of the purposes of these type of meditations with a lot of emphasis on sound and visual is to break down the barrier between the etheric body and these higher levels, the astral, the mental. And you will know when that process is taking place, because you will begin to see that when you close your eyes, it may not be just some kind of after image, which is potentially there, but it can be actually the etheric counterpart of this. If hundreds and hundreds of students of the Ageless Wisdom have meditated on this fourth formula, not just through my presentation, but through 100 years of studying the Tibetan's works, this does exist on the etheric plane, even the astral or the mental to some degree. And when you sufficiently tune in your sight and your hearing, you will pass in and through that. And it's outside of us, but it is actually what in fact we are. It's sort of a curious thing. It's the creation of like a portal. And these portals already exist, and they exist from all the symbols that the Ageless Wisdom teachers have given us. But an artist can come along and, using the same technique, make the symbols more vibrant, make them just a little closer to the thing itself, to the real thing. And I hope in some small way I've achieved that through a lifetime of artistic studies and meditation. So with that, I want to give my appreciation for all of you who have come and shared. And I can only think of the Christ, I think, who said, or I'm paraphrasing, that at some point your cup will runneth over and you will experience awe. Yes, the information is a good place to start to frame what you're going to experience is way beyond the lower mind. So thank you. I send my love and my will and my light.
Thank you so much.
Happy trails.
Thank you.